Um, and yeah, so now let's get started, and I yeah, hope you all can take some of these skills back into your advocacy. Um, so when I say legislative advocacy, what do I actually mean in the first place? So when we say legislation, that can mean a law itself, or it can mean the process of making laws. And so laws get made by advocating to lawmakers or legislators to solve problems. Legislators can make bills or ideas for laws that can then get voted on to become laws. And so I know some people who are participating were international. And so some of what we're talking about is centered on the US and may not be exactly the same in your country. But if you live in a country that has some kind of voting process for people in your government, then some of this will definitely apply to you. And this also can apply in situations where you're trying to just get someone who's in a position of power to make changes. So let's say like at a school, then maybe a school board member would be similar to a legislator, or like the dean of students if you're at a college, that sort of thing. So this can apply in a lot of different situations. And so in the United States, who are your legislators? And so there are three sort of different levels of government. And when you're looking at the national level for the whole United States, your legislators or the legislative branch is Congress. And Congress has two parts to it. It has the Senate and the House of Representatives. Um, every state has two senators, and every state has a different number of representatives based on how many people live in the state. Um, on the state level, there are state legislatures, and most of them are structured very similarly to the US Congress, that they'll have a Senate and a House, except for Nebraska, which only has just one like combined legislature for whatever reason. Um, and then on the local level, it very much depends on where you live. Some places will have city councils, other places will have other kinds of local representatives, and like some cities have like the mayor. So yeah, you would have to look into individually about what the rules are, how the government is structured in your town. And so then, if you know who your legislators are, then the next thing to think about are the important parts of your advocacy. And so I broke it down into three questions. And so first is, what legislation are you looking at? So we talked about how bills are ideas for laws. So you may be going to talk to your legislator about a specific bill. And in that case, you want to know all the information about that bill. This can also just be a specific problem that you want to talk about instead of like a piece of legislation. If there isn't necessarily a specific bill already in the government about the topic that you care about, it may be that you want to try and convince your legislator to make a new bill about the topic you care about. So in that case, you can replace the word legislation with, what problem are you looking at? Same with the second one. How does that legislation or the problem relate to your life? So for example, if you identify as someone with a disability and you're experiencing barriers trying to get public transportation, um, you might say, like, I am someone with a disability. Um, you don't need to disclose that you're disabled necessarily. You can say, like, a loved one of mine is experiencing this. You can be your own loved one. Um, but you do want to show that that problem or that bill relates to your life or the life of someone you care about. And then lastly, what's the goal of your advocacy? If you're talking to your legislators, the goal might be to have them vote yes on a certain law, or vote no on a certain law, on a certain bill. Or it might be for them, like I said earlier, to introduce a new bill that would address the problems that you care about. But you should always know going in to whatever advocacy you're doing, what you want to get out of it. Uh, And so one way to lay out your goals and ideas is to create an advocacy story. And so now when I say advocacy story, I don't mean story in the way that many non-disabled people ask disabled people regarding their lives. Oftentimes people with disabilities are only asked for their story in a way to try and inspire non-disabled people, or what we call the self-narrating zoo exhibit, where we're giving people personal details about our lives, but not in a way that's going to change things like barriers that we face from society. And so this is a way of sort of reclaiming your story and using it in a way that can make positive change for you and your community. And so this is just a good template to follow if you are meeting with a legislator or anyone in power, um, so that you can sort of keep these points in your head. Um, so I'll go through them. To start, your name and address. It's important for your legislator to know just who you are and where you come from. Followed by the bill or law that you'll be talking about. Again, if you know that it's a specific bill, like looking up the name of that bill or the number for that bill. And if it's just, if it's not a specific bill, then you can move on to the next step, which is just what the problem is. Um, and just being detailed enough to show that that problem is significant and important, especially how it relates to your life or the life of people that you care about. Um, you also want to show how this problem affects other people besides just you or your loved ones. Because as we were talking about systems earlier, um, pe people in the government make these policies because they want to fix systemic issues, issues that affect a lot of people. Um, because legislators get voted into the government, they want to do things that the people they voted in care about. Otherwise, they won't get voted for again. So they don't have, because there's so many people that want to talk to the legislators, they don't have a lot of time and energy to be like thinking about different policies, making new ones. And so you have to show that a problem is really important, that they need to take the time to address it. And that means that the problem has to affect a lot of people. Um, and then following up with ways the problem can be fixed. So in some cases, it's pretty straightforward and just asking them to vote yes or no on a bill, which would fix your problem or make your problem worse. Um, or it can be asking them again to introduce new bills that might address your problem. Um, and then lastly, ending with an ask. This can be a question. So asking them, well, like, I've explained this problem to you. What is your administration doing to address this? Or do a request, which can be like, please vote no on this bill, or something that we ask members of Congress for is to co-sponsor a bill. Um, Co-sponsoring a bill is just say basically endorsing a bill. Um, and um, in Congress, you need a certain number of co-sponsors before a bill gets brought to a full vote. And so asking your legislator to be a co-sponsor of a certain bill can be something really important. And so how do you get people to remember your story? Um, as I said, legislators are very busy and they hear a lot of different stories. And so you want to think about ways that your story is going to stick out to them. And so to start, you want your story to be short and direct. Because if you start rambling on, the person you're talking to may tune out what you're saying. And then they might think your story isn't relevant to them. But we know that your story is relevant, so we want to make sure that you're presenting it as strongly as possible. And then making sure your story is about something that directly affects you or directly affects someone that you're very close with. Because making your story personal, that really showing how something is affecting your life, whether it be in a positive or negative way, is going to help the people you're talking to remember. If you talk about a problem really generally or vaguely, people may not remember exactly why this is important to people. You'll often hear legislators talk about specific personal stories that stuck in their mind. And so that shows how important it is to make sure that your story is personal. You should make sure that your story has enough unique details about the problem and why the solution would fix it. Again, if you don't include these details, it may seem too general. So it's finding that balance between giving enough detail to prove your point, but not info dumping. Info dumping can be great sometimes, but in this particular circumstance, we need to focus on being to the point. And then the last thing, as I said earlier, just showing that that problem you're talking about is big. And so that your legislator will feel responsible for making it right. And really showing that this is important. So finding chances to advocate, there's a lot of different places that you can look. You can look at websites of elected officials, so going directly to the websites of your congresspeople, and you can find out how to contact them. You can also look at websites of nonprofit organizations. So if any of you have looked at the ASAN website recently, which I'm assuming you either looked at that or our emails because you've signed up for this webinar, we will often post about chances to advocate. We'll post action alerts that usually will have a way for you to either look up your members of government, or we'll have direct like email or phone numbers to members of government. And so nonprofits will post about, usually if there's like something specific that is happening that they want you to contact your elected officials about. So like, for example, you might subscribe to emails for a nonprofit that really cares about the environment. And if there's a bill going through Congress that would regulate coal or something along those lines, that this environmental organization would care about, they might put on their website, here's a chance for you to contact your member of government, or they might send you an email asking you to do so. You can also find chances to advocate is in newspapers, in print or online. You can write an opinion for a newspaper. If you want to share your story in that way, that could get more people interested in learning about a problem. Or you can read newspapers and find out about issues that are affecting people in your community. And those also are good opportunities to advocate around. And then if you're specifically interested in disability advocacy, you can talk to your state's Developmental Disabilities Council, your state's Protection and Advocacy Center, or other disability rights organizations like ASAN. And then how do you contact your legislators and get more information about specific legislation? So this link here, usa.gov/elected-officials, has tools to find your national, state, and local legislators. I think it'll let you either enter your address or click on your state, and it'll list those out for you. And then govtrack.us and congress.gov will let you look up different bills by either the bill number or the keyword. And they'll also let you check whether or not your member of Congress is a co-sponsor. So I mentioned co-sponsorship earlier, that In Congress, there needs to be a certain number of co-sponsors before the bill can be brought to vote. And so you can check beforehand whether or not the member of Congress you're going to talk to is a co-sponsor. And if they're not for the bill that you care about, that is something that you can ask them to do when you talk to them. And so what ways can you advocate? So there are a lot of different ways that you can advocate, and we're not going to get to, we didn't list all of them here because that would take forever. So we just wanted to list an assortment of the most common ways that people advocate and things that you should know about as you're getting started. So phone calls, emails or letters, in-person meetings, town hall meetings, legislative testimony, and public comment periods. So to start with phone calls are really important because a lot of calls can make a big impact. So for example, when ASAN does phone call campaigns to members of Congress, the goal is to have so many people calling that the congressperson's office can't really do anything else but answer our calls. And so that shows the congressperson that we mean business, and what we care about is so important that we're going to take the time to keep calling and keep calling. And so that can impact the way that someone wants to vote about something or what your member of Congress wants to do. So remember when you're making those calls that your elected official may have more than one office. So for example, a senator in the Congress for the whole US, they'll have an office in DC, but they'll also have usually more than one office in their state. And so you can choose which office you want to call. You could call all of them if you want. And then before you call, you should prepare some kind of script so you know what to say. And this can sort of follow the same model that I shared earlier about sharing your advocacy story. And it's best to call offices that you're a constituent of. So a constituent means that you live in the area that the member of government represents. So like you were one of the people that could have voted them in. This is important because, like I said earlier, members of government like want to do things for the people that will keep voting for them. And so if you can't vote for them, they might not care as much about your opinion. This doesn't mean you should never call an office that you're not a constituent of. There are times where it's just important to show that a lot of people care about something and it's not as important that they live there. But sometimes if you are part of an advocacy campaign, they'll let you know, if you're a constituent, call this number. If you're not a constituent, you can call this other more general number. So if you can't talk on the phone, you can still use phone calls as a way of doing advocacy. So you can use this text-to-speech device and play your message over the phone. If you do this, it's important to say at the beginning of the call that this is not a robocall, that you are someone using a text-to-speech device, because otherwise you might get hung up on because people are used to robocalls. You could also ask someone to talk for you. They can call and then at the beginning of the call, they just say, "Hi, I'm speaking on behalf of your name who has a disability and can't talk on the phone," and then says the message that you wrote beforehand. You can also call after the office is closed and leave a message. Even though the offices of your legislators have set hours, if you leave a message after hours, they do have to write down that you left that message, because anytime a member of a legislator is contacted, like whether it's phone or email or in person, they have to keep a record of that. And so no matter what way you're doing it, as long as it's being tallied, it's still important in the advocacy that you're doing. So if you're anxious about talking to someone on the phone, like feel free to just call after hours. And so next is meeting in person, which is also a really important way of doing advocacy and probably the way people think of most is just going directly to meet with their members of government. Um, and so this is helpful because legislators will understand better that there's real people affected by a problem. They're able to put a name and face to an issue or a bill much more than they would be able to through talking on the phone or getting something written. Um, and so some tips before your meeting is legislators have very specific windows for which they'll schedule meetings. You can't ask too early or too late, which is kind of frustrating. Um, So we found it best to try and make the appointment at least 2 weeks before you want to meet. But if you try for more than a month in advance, they probably won't let you make the appointment and tell you to try again later. This again very much depends on state versus local. This is what we found for Congress. But in general, 2 weeks is a good rule to ask, like, hey, I'd like to meet around this time. Um, you also will probably not meet with your legislator directly because they're very busy and tend to be in like large meetings with other members of Congress or other members of government. You'll most likely meet with a staff member or aide. Um, that doesn't mean you should not respect their time in the same way that you would respect your legislator's time. Um, Staffers do most of the actual work within the government, but don't get a lot of respect for doing so because they're generally the ones meeting with people, collecting all those notes, presenting that information back to the legislator. Um, so yeah, just be sure to treat them with respect and like again the same way that you would treat if you were actually talking to your legislator. When you're preparing for your meeting, you should ask how long of a time that you'll have to meet. Um, Most meetings end up being about a half hour, but you may get a shorter or longer time slot. So it's good to know how long you'll have so you can prepare as much as you need to for that time. Um, Decide what clothes that you want to wear. What kind of clothes people expect you to wear will vary depending on where you are. Generally, in like a congressional office, they expect people to be dressed pretty nicely. Like lots of people in suits or skirts and blouses. Um, that doesn't mean that you absolutely need to do that. If that does not work with your access needs, just go in whatever way makes you most comfortable. Um, but yeah, that is somewhat of that sort of expectation. Um, and then you should research the problem or the bill that you want to talk about. Um, because it's very likely that the staffer or whoever you're talking to may not know specifically that much about your problem. Even if they are like, let's say you want to talk to them about um, inclusive education and the staffer you're talking to is like the education specialist staffer, even then, like if there's not a specific bill about it, or if it's just like a specific issue that they just might not know as much about. So just be prepared for them to say, oh, I haven't heard about that. Please tell me more. And then being able to introduce that information. Um, but if a staffer or someone you're talking to asks a question that you don't know the answer to, then you should say that you don't know the answer and that you'll look into it and get back to them. Don't try and make up an answer, but this is also a good opportunity to follow up later. Um, you should also print out any handouts or pictures before your meeting that you want to bring. Because this can be helpful to leave behind with the person you're talking to so that they remember what you talked about. And if you want to cite like numbers, like you have data about how much something is affecting a group of people, you can write that down and give it to them. You should also try to get to the meeting a little bit early. It shows that you respect the time of the person you're meeting with. And if they happen to get out of the meeting before you early, then you may have extra time to talk to them, which is also a good opportunity. So what should you do during a meeting? First, be ready to answer questions, because people may not know that much about a specific bill or subject. Don't raise your voice or argue, even if you disagree about a problem. So there may be a time where you explain like why you care about a bill, and the person you're talking to says, well, like this senator already like decided not to vote for this because we believe this other thing. At that point, it isn't really worth arguing with them if their mind is made up. And then if someone's mind is not made up, then raising your voice or getting argumentative will probably make them not want to do what you're asking. So the best thing to do if that comes up is to just focus on why you believe what you believe and why you think others should believe that, and not getting angry about why they don't believe the things you think. Um, so yeah, I understand that it can be really frustrating when that kind of thing happens. But just trying to be polite above all else, because if you end up needing to work with them again later about something else, you don't want to have spoiled that by causing an argument some earlier. Um, and then again about being polite, you should always send a thank you email after a meeting. Because it helps people remember that you had that meeting in the first place. It shows that you appreciate them and the time that they gave to you. And it lets you send any other follow-up information. Again, if they asked a question that you didn't know the answer to, you could look up the answer and then email it to them in that follow-up. A good rule for follow-up emails is to not do it the day of, but wait at least a day, but no more than a week. The next thing we're going to talk about is emails and letters. Um, this is the same idea as we had with phone calls, where the more letters or emails are sent, the bigger the impact, because it shows a lot of people care about a subject. Letters and emails work a little worse than phone calls because it's not like they disrupt someone's day. They just go into someone's inbox or mailbox. Letters work better than emails, in our opinion, because they are like a physical medium. People will have to go through sort of that stack of paper, versus an email, it's kind of easier to filter out because it's in virtual space. You could try faxing a message, which is kind of the best of both of these worlds, in that you can type out like you would an email on your computer, but then use a website so that it will print to the fax machine of your member of Congress. I think a good chunk of them still have fax machines. And members of your government in other countries may or may not have fax machines. But there are websites like faxzero.com, not officially endorsing, there are others, where you can send a fax without having a fax machine of your own. And then for writing letters and emails, we really recommend that if you get a template from an organization like ASAN, that's great for you to use, but you should always add your own personal details. Because members of Congress will get used to seeing, like, if they see just hundreds of the same email, they'll know it's important, but they're more likely to just sort of file them all away versus if you make yours personalized, they'll take the time to read it a little more thoroughly. So next is town hall meetings. And so these next couple of opportunities are more large group settings where you'll get the chance to speak directly to a legislator or legislators. So to start with town hall meetings, town hall meetings are usually set up by legislators to hear from everyday people. And again, this isn't unique to legislators. You'll probably hear about like town hall meetings happening. Sometimes schools will have kind of a town hall meeting. So, but in the case of legislators specifically, there's two types of town hall meetings. There's general meetings, which people can bring up any problem that they want. It's just an opportunity to talk directly to their legislator about anything they think is important. Or it can be a specific meeting, which is to talk only about like a bill or law or one problem that is said beforehand, what it's going to be. Yeah. Someone in the chat asked about, says, I'm curious about the aspect of using email tools and the like. It always feels somewhat difficult to split the balance between personalizing a message but still keeping the original language or ask. Yeah, and it is something that all of these things that I'm talking about today are they take practice. They're not something that people are going to be perfect at right away. To first of all, and then second of all, yeah, I think a good way to do this is that you can keep the language of just the ask, and then sort of build around it the things that you care about, whether that's like a personal anecdote or additional data that you have. But if you're having trouble around like being as direct as possible about what you want someone to do, I think keeping that one part of the template is okay. Because yeah, having that consistency in messaging is also important. And so for what to expect at a town hall meeting, so before the meeting, so to find the meeting in the first place, usually they'll be posted on either the websites of your congresspeople or it'll be the same like on nonprofit social media or web pages, they'll post that there's a town hall about if it's a specific subject that they care about. So sometimes these can be hard to find. So generally we recommend like following specific advocacy groups. And then a lot of people come to town hall meetings, and so you might not have a lot of time to talk. And they might also like be crowded, and so prepare what you need like for your sensory needs. So if you need noise canceling headphones or anything like that, or to know where you can leave and take a break. And so you should always plan ahead because you're not going to get that much time to speak. And end your speech with something that your legislator has to answer or respond to. So a question like, what are you doing about this problem? Or like, how are you going to vote on this issue? Or will you vote yes on this? And so talking about having an elevator speech ready when you get too much time to talk. An elevator speech is a short speech that you have memorized in case you get a moment with a legislator. like riding in the elevator with them. So the format of an elevator speech is similar to the structure of any other advocacy story, but it should only be 30 seconds to a minute long. And so if you think about it, every step in the advocacy story that I showed earlier is about one sentence in the elevator speech. It includes all those key points of your story, it's just shorter. And so I'm going to read out this example scenario and resulting elevator speech. And so in this scenario, Raul is a disability rights advocate. And in Raul's state, it's still legal to pay people with disabilities less than minimum wage. Raul is in the lunch line at the Hart Senate office building cafeteria. He sees one of his state senators, Senator Jones. Raul wants to convince Senator Jones to co-sponsor the Transformation to Competitive Integrated Employment Act, which is TCIEA for short. And so then this is the elevator speech that Raul had prepared, besides like the intro. So I'm just going to read it out. I'm glad I ran into you, Senator Jones. My name is Raul, and I'm a disability rights advocate and your constituent. Did you know that in our state, it's still legal to pay people with disabilities less than minimum wage? This is not fair to disabled people, but you can help change this. The Transformation to Competitive Integrated Employment Act, TCIEA S number 533, would get rid of the 14C certificates that let businesses pay disabled people below minimum wage. It's so important for everyone to get fair pay at their jobs, especially people with disabilities. Would you be willing to co-sponsor this bill and fight for fair pay with us? I'm happy to send you more information about this bill. Here's my contact information. Thank you. So yeah, as you can see, this is just, again, like a shortened version of what someone might share if they had the chance to have a longer meeting with their legislator. And so trying to get that 30-second to 1 minute speech as close to memorized in your mind as you can, because you never know when these opportunities are going to come up in your advocacy. So then the next opportunity we're going to be talking about is legislative testimony. So before a bill gets voted on to become a law, groups of legislators will have meetings called hearings to learn more about the bill. And this is a chance for everyday people to share what they think about the bill and how it would impact their lives if it were passed. And so the way that you can do this is by giving legislative testimony during these hearings. And so a legislative testimony is a lot more structured than another story, than other kinds of advocacy stories, because hearings are a very formal process. And so the things that should be in your testimony are your name and where you're from, the name and number of the bill you're talking about, and then generally what you think about it. And at the end, you should sum up your main points and what you're asking for into one sentence and thank the legislators for listening to you. The reason that we tell people this format and we tell people to be sure to write this out beforehand is because legislative testimony has to be a certain length, and that length depends on the hearing. Usually hearings will give you between 3 to 5 minutes, but there are some places where you only get 30 seconds to a minute. So you may need to look up beforehand how much time you'll have, or ask someone within the advocacy group that you're working with how much time you'll have. But that's why you need to practice beforehand and make sure that you can read everything you wrote in the time that you have to talk. But even if you don't get to read it all, you can print out copies of your testimony and give them to your legislators. so that they can still read all of it afterwards. They'll have it on file. And so usually hearings, they'll list who will be there. So you should print out enough for every legislator that's on that list, plus a little bit extra. And then on that same website where you might find who's going to be at the hearing, there will usually also be a place to sign up to testify. For places where there's not an online sign up, the sign up will happen right before the hearing actually starts. And you should be sure to get there early or try to sign up as early as possible because they will run out of spots. So if you want to give your testimony, then you want to make sure to sign off before that will get cut off. And so during the hearing, you'll testify in front of a group of legislators and other people who will be testifying. And then after your testimony, your legislators might ask you questions. Again, if you don't know the answer to a question, don't make one up because they will fact check. But you can offer to send follow-up information directly to the email addresses of your legislators or their staffers after the hearing to give them that information. Even if you sign up for a spot to give testimony, time may run out before you can. That's okay. It can be disappointing, but you can still, again, give out your copies that you printed out so that legislators will still be able to see your testimony. And then the last thing that we're going to talk about today is public comment periods. And so this is what relates to after a law gets passed. So after a law is passed, the government needs to figure out how the law will be put into action. And so these decisions are called regulations, or you might hear them called rules as well. And so people give their opinions on regulations during public comment periods. Public comment periods can also happen for laws that passed a long time ago, because they happen whenever the government tries to make new regulations for a law. So for example, some laws will have their regulations reopened because they're so old that they were made before the internet and before smartphones. And so they'll need to get updated. So because the internet has changed so much, so that they are relevant and still work like for people today. And so whenever a law, like a new law gets passed or an old law gets new rules added to it, people will get the chance to share what they think. And so public comments are submitted online. There's for the US government, it's at regulations.gov. And every state, I think every state, also has their own variation of this website. And as I mentioned, like some states will call them rules, some states call them regulations. So you might have to look up both keywords to find out information for your area. But you can go directly to these websites and look up the name or number of the law. And then it's just written comments. So it's basically the kind of stuff that you would put in an email as you're sharing your story about if you see like a certain regulation that you think would make the law worse, you can say so. You can say regulations that you hope would be added. So it can be a little bit confusing, especially the language that's used in regulations. So I recommend working with advocacy groups that care about the issues you care about to be able to have a better idea of what the best kind of comment to submit is. And so lastly, I wanted to point out some resources that if you wanted to learn more about these topics, get into them in more detail, ASAN has written a lot about legislative advocacy and community organizing in general. So we have two toolkits, the Civic Engagement Toolbox for Self-Advocates and Sharing Your Story for a Political Purpose. And then we also have a bunch of resource guides from PADSA, that's our Pacific Alliance for Disability Self-Advocacy Project. So yeah, definitely take a look at those if you're interested. And yeah, so we can take the rest of this time for questions or comments if people have them. But yeah, thank you for listening. Oh, I see a comment. I'm an autistic city council member currently serving as mayor in my city. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, and use your local elected. If a local resident needs help from a state or federal legislator, I will use my connections to get assistance / connection for a resident. By the way, every legislator is more responsive during election years. Yes, this is definitely true. And yes, something I've heard about before is there's a lot of power within local governments. Again, unfortunately, they vary so much that it is difficult to give a presentation on them that applies to everyone. But yeah, I definitely, local governments are a really great chance to get started advocating as well. So yeah, definitely don't ignore them. Oh, I see a hand up. You can go ahead.
Hi. So I'm trying to think of like a way to state this in a way that's I'm trying to think of how to state this in a general way so it's not just specific to me. But um so like in my day job, I work with a lot of like legal aid organizations already. Um, but I guess I guess what I'm curious about is like once you sort of have existing connections with like organizations and like various institutions that are already involved in like daily advocacy work, uh, do you have like input on how to get them more interested in like policy advocacy if what they're more used to is kind of individual service work?
Uh, yeah, so that can be hard. That's a really good question. Um, because so I guess in the case of service organizations, I've found a lot of, I guess, hesitancy to get involved in that sphere because they don't see it as their realm. But I think using the idea of like advocacy stories to show, hey, these problems that we're talking about, like they connect to you too, and there's things that you can do. Like it depends on if you're appealing to like a person who's in like a very powerful position administratively, or if you're appealing to someone who works directly with people with disabilities, like on a day-to-day basis. And you kind of have to tailor your message to say like, hey, this is important to me. This is important to a lot of the people you work with. Here are the things that you could do. Will you commit to doing any of them? And then we didn't get to talk about this too much in this presentation, but when you're thinking about your advocacy strategies, thinking about how to sort of escalate as time goes on. So if someone is just plain not listening to you and you need them to listen to you, if phone calls don't work, um, like some kind of sit-in or protest, like depending on the situation, depending on if there's like if you are organizing around a certain subject. But the idea is even if you think something is a dead end, there's usually other people you can work with or other avenues that you can show that you're not going to give up on those things. Hopefully that helps a little bit. I know it's a really broad topic.
No, and I knew I was like asking a question that like didn't have a single easy answer. I would know it, right? So thank you. I really appreciate that.
All right. Well, if nobody has any other questions, I think it would probably be okay to end a little early and give y'all some of your afternoon slash evening back. Um, so again, thank you so much for attending the Advocacy 101 and legislative advocacy webinar. If you have any other questions, my email address is on the screen and you have the email addresses of Jules, I think. So yeah, I'm always happy to answer questions about this and provide more information. So yeah, thank you all so much again for coming and have a good rest of your day.